All right, let's dive in. Today we're taking a look at Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck.
Oh, yeah. I know this one gets a lot of buzz.
It does. It does. And we should be clear up front. This isn't about just like, you know, being apathetic or tuning out the world.
Right, not at all.
Yeah, it's more about being really intentional with your energy and your attention in a world that, let's face it, bombards us with stuff to care about.
Yeah, and I think that's why it resonates with so many people, Like there's just so much information, so much pressure to be everything to everyone.
Exactly. And Manson's like, hey, it's okay to not care about everything. So
Yeah.
how do we figure out what to actually give a feck about?
Well, he uses this great analogy of a feedback loop from hell.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the feedback loop from hell.
Yeah, it's basically this cycle where you feel bad about something, then you feel bad for feeling bad, and it just keeps spiraling.
Like a downward spiral.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He actually compares it to trying to walk towards a house while tripping on acid.
Okay, I can kind of see that, like you're never going to reach the house.
Right. It feels like you're getting further and further away the more you try.
And I feel like social media just throws gasoline on that fire.
Oh, absolutely. You're constantly bombarded with everyone's highlight reel, which just makes you feel worse about yourself, which then feeds back into that loop.
Totally. So Manson's advice is to focus on choosing your problems. Because let's be real, life is full of problems.
It's unavoidable.
Yeah, but we have a choice in which problems we choose to focus on. Are we going to obsess over things we can't control?
Or are we going to choose problems that align with our values and actually help us grow?
Right. So how do we figure out what those good problems are, the ones worth giving a damn about?
Well, Manson talks about this idea of values, the principles that guide our decisions and actions.
Like a compass.
Exactly. But here's the thing. A lot of us are operating with values that we haven't consciously chosen.
We're just kind of going with the flow.
Right. Maybe we've inherited them from our families, or maybe we've absorbed them from society without really examining if they actually resonate with us.
And those values might not actually be serving us.
Exactly. So Manson encourages us to take a step back and really think about what's important to us, what we want our lives to stand for.
He talks about this metric trap, right? Like how we get caught up in measuring our success by external markers that might not actually reflect what matters to us deep down.
Yeah, things like money, fame, social media likes, all that stuff.
But we chase those thinking they'll bring us happiness, but then we end up feeling empty.
Exactly. It's like we're climbing the wrong ladder.
It makes me think of that example he uses, contrasting Dave Mustaine, who was kicked out of Metallica and formed Megadeth, with Pete Best.
The almost Beatle.
Yeah. Mustaine achieved huge commercial success, but he was always comparing himself to Metallica. Always felt like he was coming up short.
Right, whereas Best found happiness and fulfillment in a quieter life, playing music he loved.
It's such a powerful illustration of how our chosen metrics for success can really dictate our happiness, or our unhappiness, as the case may be.
Totally. And I think this ties back into the idea of responsibility.
Okay, how so?
Well, Manson argues that while we may not be to blame for everything that happens to us, we are always responsible for how we react to it.
We have the power to choose how we interpret our experiences and what meaning we make of them, even the tough ones.
Right. It's not about playing the victim role. It's about taking ownership of our lives and choosing how we want to move forward.
So it's like we can acknowledge the role of genetics or upbringing or whatever, but we don't let those things define us.
Exactly. We don't have to stay stuck in that story. We can choose a different one.
So I'm curious, what are some practical steps we can take to actually start applying these ideas? Like, how do we start choosing better problems and defining our values?
Well, first, I think it's about being honest with ourselves, about what we truly value, even if it goes against societal norms or expectations.
It can be scary to go against the grain, though, right?
It can be, but it's also incredibly liberating.
And Manson also talks about the importance of embracing uncertainty, right? Like how clinging to certainty can actually hold us back.
Yeah, he says that certainty is the enemy of growth. If we think we already have all the answers, we stop learning, we stop evolving.
It's like we're living in a bubble.
Exactly. He uses this fascinating experiment where people are put in a room and told to figure out a sequence of actions that will make a light flash.
But the light's flashing randomly.
Right. But the participants convince themselves they found the pattern. It's such a great illustration of how our brains crave certainty and try to make sense of the world, even when there's no inherent meaning.
So it's about being more comfortable with doubt, with not knowing all the answers.
Exactly. And this ties into another important concept, the power of rejection.
Okay, how so?
Well, Manson argues that rejection isn't something to be feared, but rather something to be embraced.
I think that's a hard one for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. We're conditioned to seek approval and avoid rejection, but Manson flips that script and says that rejection can actually be a sign that we're on the right track.
Like, if everyone's agreeing with us, maybe we're not pushing ourselves enough. Maybe we're not being true to ourselves.
Exactly. It's about having the courage to stand out, to be different, even if it means risking rejection.
He talks about his own experience traveling the world, right? How he realized that the more he chased breadth of experience, the less fulfilling each new experience became.
Yeah, he found that true fulfillment came from depth of experience, from committing to a few things that really mattered to him and letting go of the rest.
It's about quality over quantity, right? Focusing on what truly resonates with us and saying no to the rest.
Exactly. It's about being intentional with our time and energy and creating a life that reflects our values, even if it means going against the grain.
So are we saying we should all just become hermits and reject the world?
No, not at all. It's about finding a balance, about being selective with our energy and attention. It's about choosing our battles wisely, both literally and figuratively.
So it sounds like a big part of this is about understanding ourselves better, about being more self-aware.
Absolutely. The more we understand ourselves, the better equipped we are to make choices that are aligned with our values and create a life that is truly meaningful to us.
Okay, so we've talked about embracing uncertainty, choosing our problems, defining our values, and the power of rejection. But what about that whole death thing? Like, how does that fit into all of this?
Well, you know how we were talking about immortality projects? Those things we cling to for a sense of meaning and purpose, even if they're not actually serving us?
Yeah, like striving for fame or fortune or whatever.
Right. Manson argues that those projects can become a trap if we're not careful. He encourages us to confront our own mortality, to accept that our time on this planet is limited, and use that awareness as a catalyst for living a more deliberate and purposeful life.
So it's not about being morbid or depressing.
No, not at all. It's about recognizing that our time is precious and choosing to spend it on things that truly matter to us. It's about finding meaning and purpose in the present moment rather than constantly chasing something outside ourselves.
That's a powerful idea.
It is, and it really gets to the heart of what Manson is trying to say in this book. It's not about not caring about anything. It's about choosing what to care about and choosing wisely.
I love that.
Me too. I think it's a message we all need to hear, especially in today's world.
Absolutely. So how do we put this into practice? What are some tangible things we can start doing today to apply these ideas to our lives?
Well, I think it starts with self-reflection, with taking some time to really think about what we value, what we want our lives to stand for, and what we're willing to struggle for.
It's about getting clear on our priorities.
Exactly. And then it's about taking action, even if it's just small steps. It's about being willing to experiment, to fail, to learn, and to adjust our course as we go.
It's about embracing the journey, not just the destination.
Exactly. And I think it's also about being kind to ourselves along the way.
Yes, we're all works in progress.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important point to remember. This isn't about achieving some kind of perfect state of not giving a feck. It's about being more mindful, more intentional, and more compassionate with ourselves and with others.
It's about creating a life that is both meaningful and fulfilling on our own terms.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, this has been a great discussion. We've just scratched the surface of the subtle art of not giving a feck.
Yeah.
There's so much more to explore, so much more to unpack.
Right. And so many practical takeaways that we can apply to our lives right now. Like, how do we deal with difficult emotions? How do we set healthy boundaries? How do we find the courage to pursue our dreams even when we're afraid?
And those are just some of the questions we'll be tackling in the next part of our deep dive.
It's going to be good.
Can't wait. So be sure to join us for part 2, where we'll delve even deeper into the subtle art of not giving a feck and offer some practical tips for putting these ideas into practice.
It's going to be fun, and hopefully it will help you create a life that's a little bit more badass, a little bit more authentic, and a whole lot more fulfilling.
See you there. Welcome back to our deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a feck.
You know, we spent a lot of time in the last part talking about kind of the big picture ideas, right? Like uncertainty and values.
Yeah, laying the groundwork.
But how do we actually put this stuff into practice in our everyday lives?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Exactly. And I think one of the most powerful things Manson talks about is this idea that action actually fuels motivation.
Okay, yeah, I remember that. Like, we tend to wait for motivation to hit us like a bolt of lightning.
Right. But it's really the other way around. It's like we're waiting for permission to start living the life we want.
Yeah, and we end up stuck.
Procrastinating. But Manson's like, just start doing,
Just do it.
Well, not exactly Nike's slogan, but yeah, the idea is that even taking small steps can create momentum.
Okay, I can see that. Like
Ugh.
breaking things down into smaller chunks.
Yeah. Right. And he uses his own experience with writing as an example. He didn't start out writing like New York Times bestsellers.
Right, he was blogging.
Yeah,
Yeah,
blogging, articles, just putting stuff out there, building that habit.
I like that. It's about the process, not just the end goal.
Exactly. It's about consistency and showing up even when you don't feel like it.
And it's okay to mess up along the way.
Absolutely. Embrace the stumbles. Manson actually sees failure as essential for growth.
He does, yeah.
Mhm.
He even says that graduating college during the recession kind of helped him embrace failure.
Wow, how so?
Well, he says starting out at what felt like rock bottom gave him this sense of freedom, like he had nothing to lose.
Interesting. Makes sense, right. When you're already down, you're more willing to experiment and take risks, maybe?
Yeah, it's like that pressure's off.
And that's where the real learning happens, right? When we're outside our comfort zones.
So failure's not the opposite of success. It's part of the process.
Totally. And he poses this question, which I think is brilliant. He says, would you rather make decent money and work a job you hate, or play an internet entrepreneur and be broke for a while?
That's a tough one.
It is. But it really gets you thinking about what you're willing to sacrifice, what truly matters to you.
And that ties back into defining our values,
Yeah.
right? Like, what are we actually aiming for?
Yes. Because we can get so caught up in chasing external markers of success that we lose sight of what actually brings us joy and fulfillment.
The metric trap.
Exactly. And Manson challenges us to ask ourselves some tough questions, like, first, what pain am I willing to sustain?
Pain. Like, nobody wants pain.
Well, he's not talking about seeking out suffering. He's saying that any worthwhile pursuit, anything we truly care about, will come with challenges.
I see. Like, there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Right, right. He uses his writing journey as an example. He didn't just magically become a successful author. It took a ton of work, rejection, self-doubt.
Yeah, the struggle is real.
It is. But he was willing to go through it because he valued the freedom and autonomy that writing gave him.
So it's about finding what you're willing to fight for. What's worth the struggle?
Absolutely. The second question he asks is, what is true about my situation?
Okay, interesting. So, like, being honest with ourselves about where we're at.
Exactly. It's about separating our feelings from the facts. And, he talks about his struggles with social anxiety.
Oh, yeah, he was really shy.
Right. And he had to push past that fear by putting himself out there, even when it felt super uncomfortable.
Fake it till you make it.
Kind of, yeah. It's about challenging our assumptions and confronting our fears head on.
Not letting them hold us back.
Right. And then the third question is, would being wrong create a better or worse problem than my current problem?
Oh, that's deep.
It is, and it encourages us to think about the potential consequences of our beliefs and actions. Like, what if we're holding on to a belief that's actually hurting us?
I guess that's kind of like what happened with his friend's brother. Right.
Oh, yeah. The one who was convinced his sister's fiance was bad news.
Yeah. He caused so much drama, but he refused to even consider the possibility that he might be wrong.
Right. And sometimes we need to be willing to let go of our certainty, even if it's scary, because holding on too tightly can lead to bigger problems.
So it's about being open to other perspectives.
Exactly. And that ties into embracing uncertainty, which we talked about earlier.
Yeah, the idea that certainty can actually hold us back.
Right. Because if we think we already know everything, we stop learning, we stop growing.
Light experiment, right?
Exactly. It shows how our brains crave certainty and meaning, even when it doesn't exist.
So we have to be willing to be wrong sometimes.
Absolutely. And to learn from our mistakes. That's how we grow.
And that brings us to the story of Meredith, the woman who falsely accused her father of abuse.
Oh, man, that one was heartbreaking.
It was, but it's a powerful reminder that our memories and perceptions aren't always accurate.
Yeah, we all have biases.
And we have to be willing to question our own narratives, especially when they're causing harm.
So it's about being open to new information, to the possibility that we might be wrong.
And being willing to change our minds.
Exactly. And that takes courage.
It does. Okay, so we've talked about embracing uncertainty, action fueling motivation, choosing our problems, and defining our values. But what about setting boundaries?
Ah, yes. Boundaries are key, especially in our relationships.
And I know Manson uses that Romeo and Juliet example, right? To illustrate what not to do.
He does. It's like the poster child for unhealthy love. They were so consumed by each other that they lost themselves.
Yeah, totally. Like unhealthy codependence.
Exactly. And he contrasts that with healthy love, which is based on mutual respect, clear communication, and a willingness to both reject and be rejected.
So it's about being independent, but also being able to connect.
Right, finding that balance. And it's about taking responsibility for our own happiness and well-being, not expecting our partners to complete us or fix us.
Yeah, we got to be whole people on our own.
Absolutely, and that means being willing to say no sometimes, even to the people we love.
Which can be tough.
It can, but it's essential for setting healthy boundaries and creating a life that's truly aligned with our values.
Okay, so boundaries are important. Rejection is good. Uncertainty is our friend. What else have we got?
Well, we got to talk about death.
Oh, yeah, big D.
Right. As we mentioned earlier, Manson had this pivotal moment where he really confronted his own mortality.
And it changed his whole perspective.
Right. And he encourages us to embrace the fact that our time is limited, not in a morbid way, but as a reminder to make the most of it.
To not waste time on things that don't matter.
Exactly. He ties us back to those immortality projects we were talking about.
Oh, right, those things we do to feel important or leave a legacy.
Right. And they're not inherently bad, but they can become a trap if we're not careful. Like, think about someone who's obsessed with their career or with leaving a legacy through their children. It can consume their whole life.
Yeah, they lose sight of what's really important.
Yeah, exactly. Manson suggests that the real key to a fulfilling life is finding meaning and purpose in the present moment, not constantly chasing something outside ourselves.
So it's about being present, being grateful for what we have.
Absolutely. And recognizing that true happiness comes from within, from living in alignment with our values, not from external validation.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about action, failure, values, boundaries, and even death. But where do we go from here?
Well, I think the next step is to take some time for self-reflection. What resonated with you the most from this deep dive? What are some areas where you might want to apply these ideas in your own life?
Yeah, it's about taking what we've learned and making it our own.
Exactly. And remember, there's no one right way to do this. It's about finding what works for you and what helps you create a life that feels both meaningful and fulfilling.
And it's a journey, not a destination.
Absolutely. We're all constantly learning and evolving, and that's okay. In fact, that's the beauty of it.
I love that. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. But we're not done yet. We still have so much more to unpack, so many more practical tips and insights to share.
Right. Like, how do we deal with difficult emotions? How do we set healthy boundaries? How do we find the courage to pursue our dreams even when we're afraid?
All that and more in part 3 of our deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a feck. Join us then. Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a feck.
You know, we've really been unpacking some heavy stuff,
We have?
but I think it's all been leading up to this. Like, how do we actually take all this and make it work for us?
Right. How do we apply it to our lives starting right now?
Exactly. So one of the biggest takeaways for me, and I think a lot of people get stuck here, is this idea that we need to wait for motivation to strike.
Oh yeah, like we need that perfect moment or the stars need to align.
Right. And then we end up just spinning our wheels and getting nothing done.
Procrastinating.
Exactly. But Manson makes this really compelling argument that it's actually action that fuels motivation.
So we got to flip the script.
Yeah, instead of waiting for motivation, we just got to start doing...
Even if it's just small steps.
Exactly. Small steps consistently over time, that's where the magic happens.
He uses his writing as an example, right? Like he didn't just wake up one day and write a bestseller.
Exactly. It was a process, years of writing blog posts, articles, anything to get the words flowing.
Building those habits.
Exactly. And, you know, along the way, we're going to mess up.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But Manson actually sees failure as part of the process.
He does, yeah. He doesn't shy away from it.
Not at all. And he even credits, in a way, graduating college during the recession with helping him embrace failure.
That's interesting. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that about a recession.
Right. But he says starting at what felt like rock bottom gave him this sense of freedom.
Like he had nothing to lose.
Exactly. And that allowed him to take more risks, experiment more, and ultimately learn and grow more.
So it's like failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of the journey.
Totally. And, you know, this all ties back into defining our values.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
Like, what are we actually striving for? Are we chasing external markers of success, or are we pursuing things that genuinely matter to us?
Remember that guy who was obsessed with his height?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he thought that was the reason he wasn't successful in dating.
And it was just this external factor that he couldn't control.
Right. But he was measuring his worth based on that instead of focusing on his internal qualities.
The things that really matter.
Exactly. So Manson really encourages us to ask ourselves some tough questions, like what pain am I willing to sustain?
What pain?
Not like physical pain, but like what are the challenges I'm willing to face in pursuit of what matters to me?
Okay, I get it.
You know, anything worth having in life is going to require some effort, some struggle.
So it's about choosing our battles.
Exactly. And then he asks, what is true about my situation?
So like being honest with ourselves.
Yes. Separating our feelings from the facts. You know, he talks about his own struggle with social anxiety.
Yeah, he wasn't always the confident guy he seems like now.
Not at all. He had to work at it, push himself outside his comfort zone, even though it felt uncomfortable.
It takes courage to do that.
It does. And then the third question is, would being wrong create a better or worse problem than my current problem?
Okay, that's a good one.
It makes you think, right? Like, what if the beliefs we're clinging to are actually holding us back?
It's like that story with his friend's brother.
Oh, the one who was so sure his sister's fiance was no good.
Yeah, and it created so much tension and drama,
And he refused to consider that he might be wrong.
which just made the whole situation worse.
Exactly. So sometimes we need to be willing to let go of our certainty, even if it's scary.
Because clinging to it might actually be causing more harm than good.
Right. And that leads us back to embracing uncertainty, which we talked about earlier.
Yeah, being comfortable with not knowing all the answers.
And you know, that ties into the story of Meredith, who falsely accused her father.
Yeah, that was a tough one.
It really highlighted how our memories and perceptions can be unreliable.
And how important it is to be open to other perspectives.
Exactly. Even if it means challenging our own beliefs.
So we've talked about action, failure, values, boundaries, even death, and now uncertainty. Is there anything else we need to know to actually start applying this not giving effect philosophy?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to remember that this isn't about becoming some kind of unfeeling robot.
Right, not about apathy.
Exactly. It's about choosing what to care about and choosing wisely.
Being intentional with our energy.
Right. And it's also about being kind to ourselves along the way.
Yes, we're all works in progress, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important point to remember. This isn't about achieving some kind of perfect state of not giving a fuck. It's about being more mindful, more intentional, and more compassionate with ourselves and with others.
It's about creating a life that is both meaningful and fulfilling, but on our own terms.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, this has been an amazing journey through the subtle art of not giving a feck.
It has. We've covered so much ground.
But the real work starts now, right? Like taking all this and putting it into practice in our own lives.
Exactly. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a challenge. What is one thing you're going to stop giving a feck about today?
What's one thing you're going to start giving more of a fuck about? What's one small step you could take today to move towards the life you truly want to live?
We hope this deep dive has given you the tools and the inspiration to start creating that life, a life that is more authentic, more fulfilling, and a whole lot more badass.
Thanks for joining us.